Yep.
Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the Advisory Board podcast. I've got with me a special guest, a good friend of mine, Joel Cochran. Joel, say hi to everybody.
Hey, Dave, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Hey, so let me do a proper intro for Joel, and then we'll frame up the topic today. So Joel he's a business coach, and he's a customer experience kind of consultant. He works for Two Maids A Mop, an HFC company, and has helped them transform the way that they engage their leads using technology. He's a client of ours. And so the topic today that we're going to talk about is actually kind of a transformation story a little bit. Let Joel share some experience he had taking them from where they were to where they are today, which ultimately has contributed to a lot of success for the company. Joel, if you don't mind, as we get started, maybe tell us a little bit about your personal background and yourself, because Joel, guys, he's been in client success or customer experience and sales and all sorts of things over many years and many different concepts. So before we dive in, Joel, tell them a little bit more about yourself. Give your brag for a minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you want me to go back to like age 3 and then come forward, or
maybe not, maybe like a little bit post birth. I'd say maybe
yeah.
professional career only.
Yeah, so I've done a number of things: construction industry for a little over 15 years, and then into the health and fitness world, and ran large platform gyms, which obviously sales was a big thing for us there. And then kind of did my own thing for a couple of years. Opened up my own gym with my son, which was about 7 years ago, which we've had pretty good success with that. And in fact, use Client Tether for our gym currently. And then I've been with Two Maids A Mop now for about 2.5 years. So, yeah.
Well, Joel, let's dive in a little bit, if you don't mind. So we're going to turn back the hands of time to about February of 2020. Tell us a little bit about Two Maids A Mop, where you guys were at on the client engagement side of things, technology side of things.
Yeah. So, this was the first business I'd been a part of where the lead generation was very robust. So our marketing team does a great job. Katie and her team does just a fantastic job of the lead generation. But once the franchise owner got the lead, it was kind of a hodgepodge of tools and systems and what have you. I mean, we probably had anywhere from a big chief tablet to an Excel spreadsheet and everywhere in between. I've had managers tell me today they had Post-it notes all over their desk, and that was the way they, tracked leads, and that was their tool of choice in some cases for, lead conversion. So it was all over the place, and it just, it was long past time that we needed some cleanup.
Yeah. Well, as you and I both know, 3M stock took a bit of a dive in May of 2020. Didn't realize that we had a hand in that with all the Post-it notes that we took off of people's desks.
Yeah.
Hey, tell us a little bit about, so I mean, in general, you had great operations technology in place, but there was a kind of a hole on the front end of the lead engagement and the CRM side of things, right?
Right. And there was no consistency. And that's what I think was missing from an operations standpoint, is having a consistent, solid mechanism, at the franchise level to really handle that lead. And as everybody knows, not all leads get converted, but when we took on and started using Client Tether, we had a robust system, that would allow us to manage those leads, prove conversions, and it was just so much easier to manage that whole process, and it gave us consistency, across the entire network. So
yeah, that's something I hear from a lot of folks, and I appreciate you being willing to talk about that, Joel. So even though a lot of folks sign up for franchising because they want a consistent business process, they don't execute consistently. So one of the things that I remember when we were early working on this together that was important to the marketing side of thing and the executive team was, we want the lead that comes in into Birmingham to have the same experience as the lead comes into Virginia Beach, the same experience that comes in when you're in Austin, Texas. Like there was a concern about that because there wasn't, there was a process they were supposed to follow, but not a tool. What did you guys see as far as the brand experience difference before things got started? Like how much variability did you see in that, or even performance difference across the different locations in the country?
Yeah, I think, when we rolled it out, obviously every user has a little different ability and capability with their use of technology, but we had a tool then that everybody could be consistent around. And I think it created I guess a consistency and a standard for our brand experience. But it didn't, I think, and I still talk about this today as I coach and support the operators and the managers, is it left enough wiggle room in the design that they could customize, but yet in a broader level, it was a standard experience for the customer with the delivery of the messaging, whether it was a text or an email or a click to dial. But they could make some variations even at the store level. And it had that capability and that power, because not everybody runs the same business, but not everybody wanted to do it in exactly the same way. So it left enough wiggle room in there for them to customize.
And how important was that for your franchise owners to feel like they still had some autonomy over the way they spoke to their customers, even though they were becoming part of this, standardized process?
Yeah, exactly. I think, a lot of them, they're entrepreneurs at heart, right? So they kind of want to do their own thing, but yet, they buy into a franchise system because, somebody's developed a successful playbook. So I think it kind of gave them the best of both worlds, where they could still, have that bit of variation in how they message, the tempo, the cadence of the messaging to convert those leads, but at the same time have a solid tool to make all that happen. So yeah, I think it just struck the right balance between those two.
Great. Hey,
Yeah.
Question for you, shifting over toward kind of franchisor, pre-client to the relationship situation. How much visibility was there when you guys, you had this great lead gen process? Katie and team were pumping out leads to all of the locations. How much visibility was there once the leads were handed off to see how they were performing?
Yeah, our measurement of lead conversion, and I think that's your question more or less, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, the reporting we got wasn't really, I don't think we could fully be confident in the numbers that we were getting. What we knew in general, that they were single digit in terms of conversion, right? So, what we knew was that it wasn't good. Now, whether it was 9% or 7% or 5%, I think we had a little bit of sloppiness in some of the reporting of what we were trying to get to. Because I don't think we could always trust the numbers that we were getting.
I think that's fair. I mean, you were experiencing it from the other side as well, but I did recall that there was a need for better visibility, better data visualization, even on what was happening by location. Even for like the business coach team, it was difficult. Now I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth, but it was difficult to know where to focus attention with a particular franchise owner, because you could see, well, you had got this many leads and you did this much business, so someone in the middle needs help. But it was difficult to pinpoint, oh, you're not calling your leads, or oh, you're losing people after the first clean, or oh, like it was difficult to be able to visualize that. At least that's something I.
Yeah, and Dave, I'd say even today, to be fair, we could do a lot better job in our lead conversions, but like every other small business in the country, we're having a real hard time recruiting and maintaining a workforce. So obviously you can't grow your customer base if you don't have the the teams to do the work. So that's really, I think, we've talked about this, that we haven't seen what's possible, because we think whatever we're doing now in conversions, we could probably improve that by 50% if we can kind of get the labor situation straightened out.
Yeah, under control. Well, and that's
Yeah.
actually, I want to come back to that as well, because everybody has that same pinch point right now. Everybody, McDonald's does. It doesn't matter who you are. Auto mechanic shops. I was talking to a guy because I was looking at getting some work done on an old truck that we bought, and he said, "Yeah, I'd have to charge you like $250 an hour. I don't have anyone else to do the work, so it's got to be me." And I asked him about that. He's like, "I just can't find people to come to work, and I do really cool stuff. Like he builds monster trucks and restores old military vehicles. Like he does cool work in his shop. Can't find anyone who will work with him." So everyone's got a labor problem right now. But you bringing that up makes me think of something else that we'll come back to, because I want to talk about
Yeah.
that, because you've done some pretty cool stuff, I think, that's pretty unique. So tell me, so we've described the landscape a little bit. Great company, needed some help. Let's talk initially about like franchisees. So as we, May of last year, really started rolling out Client Tether together. What were some of the immediate impacts that you saw in the way that the units started to perform that were using the platform?
Yeah, I mean, we rolled them out in I guess three different. We had 3 rounds, right? And we did about, I think, 20 to 25 stores in each round. And it took a while, I think, for people to kind of get a hang of it. If you recall, Tracy in Birmingham, she took off with it and ran, and didn't really need any support. A lot of the others did need support, but once they got it down, once they kind of learned the pattern, and the first, second, third step of the sequence of messaging, then we started seeing much more consistency in the lead flow. So I think it was just a little bit of new tool, new technology, but once they got it down, I think it was really solid. So, and then of course we had a pandemic and all those things to wrestle with. So that, for everybody was a distraction, but yeah, I think once they kind of figured out some of the functionality of Client Tether and the different aspects of it, I think a lot of times with what I saw is they kind of were intimidated by it, but once they kind of got a rhythm with it, it was really effective.
Yeah, thanks. I remember a couple of things that came out of that, and before we move on to talk about those, when we started I think kicking off those cohorts in like June, but we were done with the training of those cohorts in like August. Like it was about a 60-day window with kind of the rollout. With the guys that started in June, how long until they were comfortable in the platform, do you think?
I would say it was anywhere from, you take somebody like Tracy, which is kind of an outlier, but I would say within 45 to 60 days, the questions and the calls that I was getting really tapered off to where they felt pretty comfortable with things. I wrote the automations and we had some refining of those as time went, because, it was new for them, it was new for me. And so we kind of went through, and even today we're still refining some of those things. But yeah, I would say less than 2 months, less than 60 days, they had it down. And most of them, I think we did, and your team kind of came alongside me on this, but we did 2 to 3 training sessions with each operator, and they seem to pick it up pretty quick.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that was one thing that, as we rolled the system out, that's fairly consistent is 2 to 3 trainings, and most people are operating just fine on the platform, especially when they've got a franchisor that's created some consistent engagement strategies and deployed those through the platform. All they really need to do is learn how to operate in the system, become comfortable. So yeah, I was thinking the same thing, 30 to 60 days. Yeah, the Tracy's on the 3 to 4 week time cycle, which is a little quick to learn any and deploy any new technology. But yeah, most of them were kind of in that 30 to 60 day window.
Yeah, and just add one more thing there, David. I think if I were to go back to, March of 2020, I probably would have spent a lot more time developing a tagging scheme with a future focus of organizing, for the purposes of filtering and messaging specific, customers and or leads. So that was something kind of a lesson learned, because I think that tagging, and tagging's been around forever, right? And
Yeah.
everybody knows what tagging means. But when you're thinking about, 6 months, a year down the road, and you're trying to organize your data, you're trying to make sure that you're messaging to the right group of people, that becomes kind of a big thing. And, your platform made it really easy to do. You just have to think through kind of what you want those tags to be, and in terms of future nurturing, re-engagement, and so on.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think there are a lot of lessons learned, but we should talk through some of those as well. One of the things that I remember fairly early on is as an organization, the franchisor covered the cost of the system for the first, like 6 months, until the end of the year.
Right.
But in that period of time, there were some pretty good results. And so I was wondering if you would be willing to share that a little bit on kind of your lead conversion metrics and the uptick you saw with those, as well as, anecdotal things that you started to see change in the way the franchise owners were operating.
Well, we saw tremendous growth in the midst of a pandemic. We were setting records every month. We'd have our meetings, and, the saying became, it was almost like a bumper sticker. Well, it's the best month ever, right? And every month it was the best month ever in terms of, top line sales. And I think Client Tether had a lot to do with that, because even in the midst of trying to deal with all the COVID restrictions and all those things, they had a solid platform with which they could, nurture leads, convert them, but then re-engage those ones that, there's always going to be a percentage of them that kind of ghost you, for lack of a better word, and going back and re-engaging those leads as well. So, we were probably an aggregate. We were probably pre-Client Tether, single digit, 8-9%. And then there was a point there, I remember measuring it, that we were averaging closer to like 23%.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of backed off from there since. But again, I think that's what we already discussed, is trying to wrestle with the staffing issue.
Yeah, you can only close so much if you can't staff it, which is tough. I remember at one point you and Katie shared a number with me, a 278% increase it was like the first 90 days. It was crazy when you shared the numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you, because that's exactly what we want to see. Those are the types of experiences we've had elsewhere. But it was pretty pointed with you guys, because after the first 6 months, at least this is my recollection of it, you guys announced to everyone, okay, now we've got this tool. Now you're going to start to pay for it as a franchisee.
Right.
You're going to continue to pay the license fee for you. And in most cases, I think you'd expect to see 30-40% say, okay, that's fine, I don't want to pay it, even though it's reasonable. I just don't see value in it. But that's not what happened. So I'm wondering, when you got, you have to get too much in the details, but as you guys plan that transition and communicate it out, I think there's a best practice here. If you don't mind sharing maybe a little bit about how you guys approach that and then what the result was, that'd be great.
Of course. And, Katie and I worked on this, the messaging around this as we approached kind of that transition where we handed off the cost of the platform. But, I just put together the business case, right? and kind of laid out the ROI as a part of the messaging. And it was, you'd have a hard time reading that and looking at the numbers and not realizing that this is probably the best investment they would ever make with regard to, growing and being productive with their business, right? So, I think out of, let's just say, without getting into the numbers, let's just say we had about a 99% adoption rate. I think we lost one owner from the transition where they had to pick up the cost of the platform. So,
yeah, which was pretty significant. That's the thing that I found interesting, because a lot of folks, the franchisor just pays it, right? Absorbs it in a tech fund or an ad fund, where in your case, you did for a period of time, and then you said, now it's on you guys, you need to pay for it. The fact that you retained all but one was pretty incredible. But it spoke volumes to the value that they were seeing as they were using it. And this is franchisees. Like, I've talked to some franchise systems that if they get 50% adoption of a technology tool, they cheer. And so, I mean, what was, I mean, obviously that's great. And, we can toot the horn for a second, but what were you seeing as far as the impact on the individual franchise owners and their productivity and their feedback to you? And like, what other anecdotal things did you see happen in addition to just, a tremendous increase in lead conversion rates?
Well, I mean, in many cases, I was talking to managers, right? But as operators, those ones that had been around for a while, right? Back to the days of Post-it notes and big chief tablets and all that. I mean, they were obviously very thrilled with it. I mean, again, it took them a little bit to kind of get a handle on the technology and understand it. But once they did, it's just, it'd be like trying to take a toy away from a kid. They were all in, right? But, the fact that, and then I started teaching them some different tips and tricks and things that they could do, such as, identifying their single clean people and, doing a bulk messaging in what would take a matter of minutes to set that up. And then, within 2 or 3 hours, they'd book 4 or 5 customers. Really simple stuff. It's something that they would never have done in the past, would never been able to do in the past, right? I mean, the real world situation is, I hire a couple of people to work on a team, and I promise them a full-time job. Well, I need to make sure I have the work for them if I want to keep them. Well, that was one of the things we did, is like, well, if you need additional, sales, there's a quick way that you can generate some sales. You've got the leads there. You've either got the ones that, never converted, or you have ones who did the single service and you re-engage them. So it had a lot of just practical, application in terms of trying to develop not only top line sales, but also bringing on more and more, staff. So.
Yeah. Well, and that last part's the one I wanted to catch up with you again about, which is staffing is a big challenge in any industry. In the home service and home cleaning industries, it's particularly challenging. I've had a number of your franchise owners and folks in other industries similar to yours that have said, if I could just get enough people, I could double my business overnight. Like, I have that much. Well, you came up with some creative ideas using some of the multiple contact types within Client Tether. Do you want to, you okay sharing about that? 'Cause I thought it was pretty genius what you started doing.
Yeah, we started looking at it, and I got this from being on some demos with, I sat on a demo with Indeed, and they were basically kind of putting together a rudimentary nurturing process with their platform, and they wanted me to see it because we were doing a lot of business with them. And so the problem was that the price point was just not going to be a good fit for our small businesses. But I did take those ideas, and I thought, well, if we could export applicant lists out of our applicant tracking system, which we use Career Plug and Indeed, export applicants out of there, do a little scrub on the applicants, and then import them into Client Tether. And then I built campaigns, and then we ran these campaigns. I mean, just one that comes to mind is I exported 5,000 applicants out of their Career Plug account.
Yeah.
And we scrubbed those, but it was still probably ended up being about 4,500. And then I imported those directly into Client Tether, tagged them on the import. So we had good organization. And then we started running campaigns. All I can remember is 2 or 3 days later, the manager and the owner of that particular store said, "Hey, can you shut this off? I'm getting too many applicants."
Yeah, well, everybody else is in the Sahara Desert. It's bone dry to get applicants, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was overwhelming in the applicant flow that they were able to get. And all we did is we were able to embed the link to the job ad inside the automation, the sequences in Client Tether. So it went straight to them, both text and email. They could click, jump right to the job ad and set up their application. So it was pretty slick.
Yeah, I love that story. Shut it off, shut it off. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Everybody else is screaming for applicants and these guys are freaking out. I did have a similar experience with a client, and I'll go on a tangent for a second. It was a solar concept, and they wanted to re-engage some old leads, and they said, we got 3,000 people. We've been in the home. We've given them an estimate. We want to re-engage them. And I said, great, let's do 300. And they're like, no, we want to do all 3,000. I said, just trust me on this. I'm like, you don't want to open up that can of worms that wide. So we did. These are all dead leads that never bought. We turned on this campaign, and about 2 or 3 hours later, their head of sales calls us in a panic, and he's like, shut it off. We've already had 82 responses in 3 hours, and we can't keep up with this. And I can't remember the total value. If we would have given it a few more days, they probably would have had a 70% response rate. Like it was pretty high already. It was like 30 something 40% response rate in 3 hours through a text campaign, and they ended up generating heavy 6 figures in pipeline in a few hours of people who are like, yep, ready, come on back. Hey, sorry, I didn't get back to you. Let's talk again. It was pretty impressive. And but both on the job applicants as well as on the front end of lead engagement, what we keep seeing is if somebody went through the research process to determine that they had enough discomfort, they wanted to hire someone to come clean their home, like in your case, then the need doesn't ever just go away. It's not like the house magically cleans itself. The roof magically fix itself, right? The flooring doesn't magically repair itself. That need's still there. And if you can just stay in front of them and then find the alignment of their pain getting to the point where it now is a priority, and funding or whatever else kept them back before, you hit them around that time, then you're gonna win a deal that you would have never ever won. They would have gone back to Google, found someone else, filled out a new form, and forgotten all about you. So the same thing's true with job applicants, though. They thought the grass was greener over there. They decided to go with that job, and then they find out that it wasn't. So they're ready.
And we experienced both of those situations, right? Because someone went with cleaning company X, and and we just kept nurturing that, not salesy kind of messaging, but just a lot of times it was just educational things. And we had people that would convert 6 months after they first submitted a quote. So
it's awesome. So Joel, we've talked a lot about kind of the franchisees and how we've engaged with them. Can you share a little bit about the impact of rolling out Client Tether on the franchisor, on data visibility, performance management, like the different ways that the system was able to help support you guys with your operations and other ways?
Well, I guess from my standpoint and in the role that I played, it simplified being able to support their success,
Mhm.
right? Because we had one tool, and while everybody wanted a little variation on maybe some of the messaging and the cadence and the timing and so forth, it just standardized our ability to show them how to win,
Mhm.
right? So, the data we've got another tool right now where we're able to do a pretty good job of tracking conversions now versus what we were doing 2 years ago,
Mhm.
right? So I
Yeah.
can run some reports right now in another platform and get pretty good data on that. I think it was just our ability, they hire a new manager, and for us to, get on a call like you and I are on now or what have you, and show them how to succeed. It just made things a lot easier.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. One of the aspects that I remember talking about a little bit was on seeing how the different locations were performing, managing their leads, which was a big hole for the marketing team before, where they
Mhm.
didn't have any way to see, well, who's following up with the leads and what's happening with the leads after the fact. That was one of the
Right.
sides of the dashboarding that I remember having a bit of an impact, where you could pinpoint people that were underperforming. You had normative data to say, well, on average, we're converting here, which you have that data, but I can see you're doing this and that. And some of that data I know comes out of the back end too. But being able to look at
Right.
the pipeline view and say, oh, sweet, here's a quick comparison. Initial engagement's not as good here. That's why the conversions aren't so good there. So I guess kind of
Right.
early warnings, if you want, from like a business coach perspective into seeing how they're performing.
Yeah. I mean, between looking at their actual conversion performance
Mhm.
and then being able to get into the platform, we pretty quickly tell whether or not they're optimizing the platform or not. In fact, I'll just tell you that we probably have but one or two stores that are larger,
Mhm.
where they have multiple leaders in the store, where they're actually using it by assigning certain, functions of the platform to individuals, and making them accountable and responsible for those things. But, you know, for me and the field reps that I work with, we can look at the platform pretty quickly and make sense why their conversions are the way they are. Right. I mean, I can get into an account and look at it for 20 or 30 seconds and tell, pretty much predict, is this team converting or not?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so
And why. I feel the same way. It doesn't matter. You could drop me into any account in client tether in any business concept, and I could tell you, oh, I could tell you right now why he's struggling, and I could even get into the weeds and say, oh, I can see he hasn't made a single phone call in 2 weeks. Wow, that's a
yeah.
problem. Let's figure out why you're not making phone calls to your leads that are coming in. Like that level of detail from a perspective of someone who's led a lot of sales teams is really critical. Being able to get into the weeds, or even at the macro view, just say, the pipeline's out of date. This is everything's aging in here. Like there are a couple of, like you're saying, tools to help with that. And I look at them in my own account and say, oh, I got to manage this and change that in the way that I engage my leads. So I find it pretty
Yeah.
helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just so much, I mean, the design, the engineering, there's so much ability to customize. I was working with a manager today, and she had a question for me about when a customer actually converts, or a lead converts to a customer,
Mhm.
and the action plan kicks off by that trigger, right? Lead converted to customer. And she was trying to figure out in her busyness how she could, keep abreast of certain things. And I showed her where we can build in a step in this action plan that will send you a text message, and we can exclude the client, just
Mhm.
so in the middle of this you get a little ping with your text that tells you, whatever message you want to write to yourself
Mhm.
to bring attention to that activity. And so then you just, and of course, the 5 a.m. email that you get every day that has all of your appointments or tasks outlined, most of them will just print those out, put it on their desk, and then they, check them off as they go. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well,
yeah.
I know we're running a little short on time now, Joel. Any thoughts on, and there are a lot of folks out there that probably have some challenges where a tool like Client Tether might be a great fit. It doesn't have to be us, right? But there are certain things we do that most don't. What are a few key things if you were to reach out to someone to say, hey, if you're experiencing X, Y, or Z, you should probably evaluate using some of these automation tools that you guys have discovered for Two Maids?
Yeah, I think the fact that, Client Tether has so much flexibility.
Mhm.
I mean, I could see it being utilized for about any business, B2C, B2B. I mean, it's just really powerful. And I think, you don't have to have somebody that has I mean, I've used a number of platforms over the last 20 years running sales teams, but this has been the most powerful platform I've ever used. Powerful in the sense that it's easy to use and has a lot of customization. So I can't think where you couldn't utilize it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Joel. You've been great. Thanks for sharing some of your insights
Yeah,
and things that you guys were able to transform. And we sure appreciate you guys being good clients of ours.
yeah, absolutely. It's been good.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel.